Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Her Empowered Divorce Live Show. I'm your host, Beverly Price, divorce and empowerment coach with over 30 years' experience helping you save time, money, and heartache in your divorce. Through this show, you'll gain valuable insights on all aspects of divorce, from the technical and financial to the emotional and legal, with expert guests, practical advice, and inspiring conversations. We'll explore how you can master your divorce. You don't have to face this alone. Let's start this journey together. So, without further ado, let's get started. One of the common characteristics in the divorce experience is invisible abuse during the marriage, during the divorce, and after the divorce. Along with verbal, emotional, and mental abuse, there are personality disorders that make abuse all the more damaging. One such form is narcissism. Narcissistic abuse is a form of emotional or psychological abuse perpetuated by someone who has the personality disorder. And it's estimated to affect 5% of the US population, more commonly in men. Symptoms include excessive need for admiration, disregard for others' feelings, inability to handle criticisms. I am so happy to have a guest today who can tell us her personal story and her experience with this invisible kind of expense. Joining me today is Sabrina Victoria, who is a fabulous woman, and her story takes her from a struggling single mom to escaping a 13-year narcissistic abuse relationship. Hi, Sabrina. How are you today? I'm so glad to have you.
I am so good. Thank you so much for having me, especially on this topic.
Absolutely. For the audience, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do? Just kind of a general overview.
Yeah. What I do now, I run a community called Her Nation. It's an all-female community filled with female entrepreneurs that are dropping the victim story and stepping into their power and their voice.
Awesome. I always say that as long as he's the problem, then I don't have to do anything about me, and that's the victim mentality. And it's so critical to get beyond that to heal and recover from divorce.
Yep.
Can you share a little bit about your personal story with this invisible kind of abuse?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I like to do when I'm telling this story is just give a little bit of the back end because I think a lot of times the reason individuals fall into situations like this is because of their backstory. A lot of times individuals who are abusive or have traits of narcissism is they look for certain types of individuals. They look for individuals that
Right.
have no self-worth. They look for people who are, low self-esteem. So I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I got pregnant at the age of 20 and I wasn't married. So because I wasn't
Wow,
married,
I bet that was tough for you.
yes, it was, and because of that, and the religion I was in, I got cast out into the world, got dropped by every person I had ever known, including my mother and father, my entire community. So I
Wow.
found myself just by myself with a baby in my belly and led this stereotypical single mom, just broke life of literally no money, like digging in my
Right.
couch cushions for 25 cents type of broke. Car getting repoed, eviction notices at my apartment door, feeling, you know, no self-worth, dark, dingy, sinner, unworthy, just crying every single day, plus dealing with a child. And bottom of the barrel. And I met this guy. He had money. I thought he was given to me by God because he had money, and that was, like, what I was praying for, is for somebody to help me financially. And so because of that, I ignored all of the red flags. And Beverly, when I tell
Yep.
you there were red
Red
flags
flags are important.
from day one, people ask me sometimes, "When did you know?" I literally knew day one. But I was just so desperate for attention and affection and, like, anything towards me that I ignored all of that.
I think so many of my clients, when I take them through an assessment of their marriage and their spouse, I learned that they fell in love with the person that they thought they were, that they wanted them to be, or that what they thought they could be, fell in love with their potential. And just like you, I went through abusive relationships. And it wasn't until I did the deep self-awareness work that I learned that I had needs that began in childhood that fed into this need that I have to have attention to be okay. And that led me straight into an abusive relationship.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So when you're advising women, when you're sharing this message, this warning, if you will, what can you say are the key differences between a healthy relationship and one marked by either invisible abuse or specifically narcissistic abuse?
You know what? This is, I think, one of the most important questions that I do not get asked enough. And this was a question that I asked myself probably every day in my head. I was like, if this is not good, then what does good look like? Like, I didn't even know what a healthy relationship
Well,
was
absolutely.
supposed to look like to compare it. Because everyone tells you the movies is like fantasy and it's not real. So that's like extreme, right? Like that's not even real. And then this is bad. So what does it look like? But yeah, one of the biggest issues I think is obviously communication. You can, and I've had to learn this too when I was out of that relationship. You can communicate your feelings. You can communicate your thoughts without raising your voice. I did not
Yes.
know that. I didn't know that you could have strong feelings, like sad or angry, and you could just talk. It sounds crazy saying it now because I'm now in a healthy relationship, but I didn't know that back then. I thought that when you had a non-happy, just any other emotion besides happy, it had to be loud, it had to be angry, it had to be drama and crying, and there had to be doors slamming in order for the feeling to be felt by the other person.
Right.
And a lot of that is because they don't feel or know empathy.
Mhm.
So they don't get like heart and soul and kindness and caring. So the only way to speak to these individuals is harshly or with big emotion. So either harshly crying like crazy or angry like crazy. And there are thousands, millions of couples out there that just they cry, but it's calm.
Right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times too, what I find in working with my clients on communication is many times we communicate the feelings we want to share as opposed to thinking about is our how well is our message crafted to be received.
Mhm.
Now, with a narcissist, you can't affect a conversation. They're going to do and they're going to take it where they want. And usually I think that's to put you down because I think they feel better when they have made you feel bad because of their deep insecurities. So I think that there's just so much involved with communication, even in a healthy relationship. And I was blessed, like you too, to come from abusive relationships into something healthy. To go back for a minute to your story, and when you were talking about finding a quarter in a sofa, how did you shift your frame of mind from what could have been woe is me I'm the victim, I'm depressed, to I'm going to survive, I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to grow. How did that process evolve for you?
As far as leaving him?
Well, no, just after you left, survival.
Yeah, so after I left the relationship,
Mhm.
it girl, it was such a process. It's not a snap of the fingers.
Right,
Um, my triggers were so bad. Anything could elicit defensiveness, anything. A look, a word could elicit me going in a complete crazy spiral of yelling and screaming out of like defensiveness to save myself because that's just so what I was used to. One of the biggest pivots that I distinctly remember just in general is a decision that I had to make to drop the identity. So when you come for me, I'm not trying to project on anyone else. For me, when I came out of this relationship, my identity was I am a survivor. I was a victim. Look at me. I did this. This is what I accomplished. And my
right.
entire identity was based on this story of the abuse that happened to me. And there was a
Your
defense
identity was
and
wrapped
also
up
like
in being
making
an
him.
abused woman.
Yes, and also making him bad, right? So because
Right,
he's bad, I'm good. Look at how good I am. Look at how faithful and loyal and strong I am. And look at how bad and gross and dark he is. It was this whole story that I continued to tell it. I would word vomit to like anyone that I met. And then I would get admiration. I would get, a pat on the back of, oh, wow. And this is how I filled my cup of like worthiness. And what happened is I could not move forward as a powerful individual and stand in like my own worthiness until I dropped the story. And there was this lineage
right,
of I had to actually find a different identity outside of him to create or to stand on worthiness of my own versus the story. And I remember there was this like off a cliff, me like trying to hold on to my story so desperately, but then also knowing I had to release the story in order to become a powerful woman and find a new story. So for those listening who are maybe on the cusp, who are maybe like continue to replay it, right? Continue to stay in that victim of woe is me and I'm never going to make it. And I'm always going to be, a decade behind because of this situation.
right.
There comes a time where you have to say, it's a story, but it is not the story.
Hmm.
And then
It doesn't define me.
create a new one. You have to create a new story of who you are now and what you're becoming and what you're working towards versus what you ran away from in
And
order to kind
caused
of.
the what caused the desire or drive in you to make that pivot?
I
What
mean,
happened?
first, I mean, the most important, to be completely transparent, was I had stepped into coaching. So, as a coach, you can't be drowning your clients in your story, right?
Right,
I can always tell, in the world of podcasting, I'm sure you get this too sometimes, where you can get someone on stage and you can tell they're not healed because the story is so long. They want to tell you all the details of all of the specifics of that story because they're still in it.
right.
Versus somebody who says, yeah, in a few sentences, this stuff happened to me, but now look at the story. And most of their story is in the future versus the past.
Right.
So when I was coaching, that was a big thing. I couldn't be sitting in my own story. I had to step into where am I going now in order to lead them. And then the other reason was my son. I had a teenage son at the time. He's now 19 years old, but I had a teenage son. And I couldn't, it was not appropriate as a mother for me to sit in that space and to have him hear continuously of this story of woe that we came from. I needed to find a new purpose and a new future for us to step into, versus this sad, pitiful, dark one that we came from.
Absolutely. I think too, when we reflect back of kind of when we met them and the very beginning of that journey, that just like you talked about, the need for attention, the love bombing that they do, that so many times we would go from meeting the person and I'm madly in love and this is my lifetime relationships, and skipping over any thought process and evaluation and logical thinking and just jump right into this is, my knight in shining armor for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Did you experience any of that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's fed into society. Women want to get married and they want to have that, that life and the picket fence and all of that. So when you find somebody who is paying attention to you, one of the things that I've come to realize now that I'm older is a lot of women have this mentality of when a guy picks you, that's your guy, versus you picking a guy and that being your guy. So, really stepping back when there is a situation of marriage being talked about and recognizing, hey, am I just falling into this because he chose me, therefore this is who? Or is this actually somebody who I am picking? And if I was being completely truthful, I mean, within a few months of being in that relationship, that was not a person I was picking. That was a person that was picking me.
Wow, so impactful. We're going to take a moment now, take a quick break, and hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back with this incredible discussion. With divorce decisions impacting our emotions, financials, and our children for the rest of our lives, divorce is not a time to go it alone. I'm Beverly Price, the divorce and empowerment coach who guides you on your journey before, during, and after to save you time, money, and heartache. I help you prepare fully for what is to come, understand and navigate the process, come to terms with your emotions, learn how to communicate, and avoid costly mistakes. With the right support and guidance, you can move through the process with knowledge, strength, and confidence. Schedule a free consultation with me at herempowereddivorce.com and sign up for our ebook, and it'll be in the show notes for how to select and why hire a divorce coach. And now we're back to the show. Sabrina, there has been so much information that you have shared that is so impactful. What I also want to talk about is boundaries and how important boundaries play in these invisible, narcissistic, abusive relationships.
Yep, 100%. I think one of the biggest ones is to test it is just to say the word no when you're asked
Ooh.
to do something. I mean, that's something that I had done early on, and I saw the punishment of that. And instead of me viewing that as a red flag of like, crap, I viewed that as I need to now comply. And that's not a relationship. A relationship isn't always submit and comply. A relationship is a back and forth conversation. When somebody asks you to do something, there is two answers to that. There is a yes, no problem, or a no, I can't do that right now. And if you find yourself saying, no, I can't do that right now, and there is a punishment of any kind that is put on you, a silent treatment, a harsh word, a swear word, slamming of doors, anger, outbursts, anything of the sort, a punishment, to make you feel as if you always need to say yes to things. That right there is a huge red flag.
Wow. That's so important. Now, with a narcissist, when you say no, when you push back, what's going to happen?
I mean, a variety of things. I mean, there's always a punishment. That's what it's a punishment and reward system. So they punish you if they do not get what they want from you, and they reward you when they do get what they want from you. So as a person, it sounds bad, but it's kind of like a dog. Like, we learn very quickly what causes punishments and what causes rewards without them saying that, right? This isn't a sit down conversation where he sat down with me and said, okay, listen, these are going to be the part. We just learn it because we do an action and there's either a reward or a punishment. And then we learn, if it was a punishment, to never do that again. So, and that
Gotcha.
could be as simple as, a lot of this is love bombing. So there's
Right.
gifts and there's praise that's given during the ups and downs. So you might get something like a brand new cell phone. They might gift you something like, oh, here's a brand new cell phone. You're like, oh, and you feel like this is just love, right? Oh, obviously he loves me because look at this. We're a year in and he's already buying me my own cell phone and paying for the bill. But what happens is that is now a bargaining chip. So if you don't comply on the things of which he is asking, that cell phone is now the bargaining chip. That cell phone will be turned off. That cell phone will be taken. That cell phone will literally be broken, smashed, cracked as a punishment. And then you have no cell phone. You have to go get your own cell phone. Maybe you couldn't afford the cell phone. Maybe now you've adjusted your income so that, because now he's paying for it. So your income has been adjusted. So now you're stuck. So what happens is we realize what's happening. We realize what could be happening. And that right away makes us submit and makes us comply.
Absolutely. And I think these abusers, well, it's all about power and control, right? It's not really about who the victim is. It's all about what the abuser needs. So the other thing I was thinking about when you're talking about the cell phone is a control play could be so they could track you.
Oh, yeah.
And, keep an eye on you where you go and that kind of thing.
100. Yeah.
We talked a little bit earlier about communication, and I think communication is so important in every relationship, in divorce, in marriage, in post-divorce, and even in communication with an abuser. But as we move from an abusive relationship through self-awareness, what role does it play in maintaining a healthy relationship, and what are some of the strategies you can use?
Breathing is one.
Okay.
Knowing that you don't have to answer right away. This was a huge one for me. When you're in a relationship like that, I think one of the biggest signs for yourself or for friends is if their partner is calling them and there's all of a sudden franticness of, I have to go, I have to take this right now, or they answer it and they have to go. They have to go right now. Like right.
Or there's one call after another and another and another.
100%, 100%. So one of the biggest, oh no, I forgot what I was going to say.
One of the biggest.
What was the question again?
Well, it was all about communication.
Yeah.
And in a healthy relationship or an abusive relationship. And so I think you have, tools that you can use to communicate in a healthy relationship, but also in a narcissistic relationship, communication can take a little bit different turn.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, if the person is completely frantic with taking that phone call or who is calling and all of a sudden the vibrations of the atmosphere rise, that right there is a key sign that there is some sort of abuse happening where that person does not have a say, does not have a life outside of that individual.
Absolutely. So now, if we kind of shift to a healthy relationship, what are some of the strategies to make sure that there's strong communication in that relationship to keep it healthy?
Yeah, you don't have to answer the phone right away. That's one.
That's a
Yeah,
good one.
yeah, I remembered what I was gonna say now is just
And
you
you
don't
don't have to say where you are all the
yeah,
time and,
yeah,
report in.
yeah, you don't have to report in, you don't have to keep your receipts to prove where you were. You don't have to worry about anyone tracking your phone, as you were saying before. Um, and
So if
yeah,
we
so
shift to healthy,
yeah.
what advice do you give? You're now in a healthy relationship. I'm now in a healthy relationship. What are things we can do communication wise?
We can sit on a bed and calmly speak about our feelings. We can sit in a car driving and calmly talk about our feelings and our thoughts without feeling like road rage is going to happen or spinning out of control or doing donuts in parking lots to scare the crap out of you. There's a calmness. There's a calmness and you also don't feel afraid to say what's on your mind. I know one of the
Right.
biggest issues I had is I would have tons of thoughts of what I wanted to say, but knowing full well that I could not say them because a punishment would be versus in a healthy relationship, you should be able to say anything you want to say to that person and it be talked about in an open forum, to be able to be worked out, to be able to adjusted.
I think another one that's real important is being able to talk openly about finances in terms of financial abuse. That's one that I see. Another one is more beware of speaking in blaming terms and
Mm,
attacking terms
mm.
because anybody's going to react defensively when somebody does that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just also just one more note is and I'm saying this from my own story. In the very beginning, first of all, stay single for a second first.
Hmm.
Sec
Don't
Second,
jump into another
yes.
like I did.
And the reason that is because you haven't there hasn't been a healing process yet. And I waited a year, and still even with that year, the person that I am with now is the person that I met a year later. And for the first 6 months, it was like torture for him because I was all relationships are built up on a foundation of love and trust. All. They're supposed to be, including narcissistic relationships. That's how they get you, right? So when I see this love and trust, I didn't know. So I'm just thinking love bomb. He's love bombing me. He's
Right.
taking me to dinner. He's saying nice things. He's telling me I'm beautiful. Obviously, this is not real. This is not healthy. This is not good. And I'm waiting for the abuse. I'm waiting for the name calling. I'm waiting for the outbursts of anger. I'm waiting for things to be thrown all over the house. And it never happened. But I continued to this is too good to be true. Stop being fake. Stop being unrealistic. Nobody acts like this. Literally saying this to him until eventually, I saw the consistency of it. But if I would have jumped into something like that any sooner, I probably would have jumped right out and missed out on it
Mhm.
because I was so confused. I everything was a sign. Everything was a sign. Good things and bad things. Because the good things was
Right.
all love bombing. And anything bad was me being defensive, and him coming at me. Even just with little things like, where are the keys? He'd be like, oh, where are the keys? Which everyone asks, every household asks that question. But in my abusive relationship, when he asked, where are the keys? That was a full day reprimanding of how the whole day is now messed up because we're 10 minutes behind schedule. Every red light.
And it's your fault.
Yeah, every red light. Oh, if you wouldn't have lost those keys, we wouldn't have gotten this red light. You know, if we wouldn't have been 10 minutes later, then we wouldn't have gotten this shitty waitress at the restaurant. If we all day long. So my new partner's now like, hey, where are the keys? And I go into full blown out, just like protecting myself. And that's a year later. You know, there's some healing that has to be done.
And I would assume too, we have those instinctive reactions, both emotionally, mentally, and I also think it's kind of ingrained in our bodies. What do you tell that now healthy partner to help them understand those reactions that have almost been bred into you so that they know it's not them?
Yeah, a lot of communication. You have to, and that key one is a real story. That's a real story, probably for a year and a half. Whenever he would ask me, we would break up. It would spiral out of control. And then all of a sudden it would be literally a breakup because it started with him just asking me where the keys are in a loving way. Just like, hey, do you know where the keys are? And I would just freak out. So yeah, once I finally realized, it was actually, I was on my hands and knees washing the floor one day. I was like deep cleaning our floor. He comes out. He's like, hey, do you know where the keys are? I was like, oh my gosh. It was like an epiphany right then and there. I realized this is why this is happening. It's because of and I sat down there on the floor. He sat down on the kitchen table and I did this whole story to him for like 30 minutes on why this triggers me. I did not know that before. It did not occur to me. But yeah, so be mindful, right? We're all in a healing journey. So we're all healing at different rates. And that's how long it took me to figure that out. But when these quick outbursts of defensiveness or anger or tears come to bay that are just over the top, check in with yourself.
Right.
And figure that out. Like, why is this causing such an enormous reaction?
Right.
And allow yourself to go back and then talk about it, be open, communicate about all the abuse. There's more than just physical abuse. And I'm sure your audience knows this. There's emotional abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, and physical abuse.
And legal abuse too, through one thing after another.
Yeah. And this all causes, triggers or PTSD in us that then elicits crazy reactions in us.
Absolutely. Once, we've talked about communication, we've talked about that history and that pattern. I would think that an important component of the self-awareness is learning what your triggers are.
Yeah.
Is that what you found?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it took time, because I was still, when I left, I healed for a long time, and still, I'm sure there's still, if you bring my fiance in here, I'm sure he would tell you, girl, there's still a couple in there. But yeah, it is a process. It is a process for healing. It is giving yourself grace. It is doing it over and over again. It's not because you pinpoint or name a trigger doesn't mean like all of a sudden that's never going to trigger you again. It just means that you can catch yourself in maybe the middle of the outburst quicker. So they're shorter versus, hours of ridiculousness. Maybe you're cutting it down to maybe an hour or 30 minutes or 10 minutes where you can turn it on and off like this because you catch it that fast. But yeah, things that were really that I found myself getting super defensive about early on, I'm a completely different person now. Like, completely did a total 180 in the way that I show up for myself and my family through the healing process, through doing it over and over and over and over and over, practicing, talking to myself, inner child work to really hone in on my challenges, my triggers,
Mhm.
my issues, and to be able to step into my powerful Sabrina, what I want her to look like, how I want her to be, the way that she is supposed to, or the way that I view her stepping into problems and challenges. And it's not always perfect. And I'm always working on it. And it's night and day difference now compared to the way it was.
Wow, you have such a powerful story of almost a catharsis or an evolution from the ashes to, a beautiful life. You went through a lot of growth. How can individuals, and I think particularly women, work on rebuilding their self-esteem after an abusive relationship?
I think journaling is a big one. I journaled it in an abuse journal when I was with him. That's how I actually was able to cognitively see the cycle of abuse, because they gaslight you so bad that you
Right.
question yourself. You're like, well, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I am dramatic. Maybe I am emotional, overly emotional. So I started what I call an abuse journal, where I would write down the date, who was there, what was said, what it looked like, my reaction, just short, 1 page, 2
Right.
pages of the abuse. And pages, right? Pages. What happened, the one of the reasons I was able to leave was because I now had evidence. A lot of it is the lack of evidence.
Right.
There's no cuts and there's no bruises when you're dealing with this sort of abuse. So
Exactly.
all you're going off of is your memory, and he's telling you your memory is wrong. So it's a 50-50 chance, right? So like the odds are just down. So now I have evidence, 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 evidence. So when I went out and I pivoted out of that relationship, continuing a journal of growth, then I had evidence, right? Bought, I rented a new place, evidence that I'm taking care of myself. I bought my car cash, evidence that I'm taking care of myself. I have 50 grand in my bank account, evidence that I'm taking care of myself. My child is happy, right? I start to write down my wins. I start to write down the things that are amazing about me. Promotions, job, career, money, family, healing,
Absolutely.
my weight, my health, my viewpoint, men that I'm meeting, conversations that I'm having, and then evidence. Evidence that it's working, evidence that you're stepping into your power, evidence that you can and you will be. Um, was a huge had a huge impact on me.
So powerful. I always like to ask my guests if you have tips for our audience. What tips would you share for that recovery and moving forward in their journey?
Tips for recovery. First of all, everything's going to be okay. That's like my mantra since I was like 26 years old, still with him. Everything's going to be okay. That's like the number one thing. You have to remind whether you're in the relationship still, walking out of it and going through some insane legal battle, or you're on the other side of it, everything's going to be okay. You can do hard things. One, right?
Mhm.
Two, you got to work on your inner child. One of the things that literally has saved me is this vision that I have of myself, of my Sabrinas, right? I have a 2-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 17, 32, 38, 40-year-old Sabrina inside of me. And every single one of those Sabrinas led 1 year of life. And they did the best they could with the information they had. And I am
Absolutely.
incredibly grateful to every single one of those Sabrinas. There was Sabrinas that wanted to die. There was Sabrinas that wanted to commit suicide. There was Sabrinas that wanted to run away. There was Sabrinas that wanted to get drunk on alcohol. There was Sabrinas that thought about doing drugs, even though she had never done drugs, just to numb herself. Also, all kinds of Sabrinas that went through so much abuse, rape, mental, emotional, financial, no money, stress, crying in the bathroom. And they woke up every single day and they continued to step forward into that day. And because of every single one of those Sabrinas, I am here today. And it is now my duty and my obligation to take that baton and to step up into the new me, right? We need to continue to evolve. We need to continue to step up. We don't have to run 50 steps ahead. We have to take a step up from where we were. And we have to lead a year of our life and learn as much and educate ourselves as much so that we can then hand the baton off again to the next generation of you, right? The next year of you. And so
I'm going to have to, I love this conversation, but we're running out of time. I'm so sorry to cut you off. Thank you so much for being my guest today. I totally loved it. Totally loved it. All of Sabrina's information and mine are available in the show notes that you can see for the episode. So join me next Thursday. Join me next Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, where I'll be diving deeper into what other expert professionals can help you on your separation and divorce journey. Until next time, take care and be empowered.